Hey everyone, this is FIDE Master Kavutskiy here for Chess.com, and today I'm going to be showing you guys a really exciting game full of tactics and sacrifices and lots of really crazy complications. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. I had this position as black in a tournament back in October of this year, and my opponent just played h4, threatening to trap my bishop with h5. So I was initially going to play either h6 or h5 in this position, and in both of these cases I think the position remains pretty unclear, but white gets some good attacking chances on the king side because they have this nice pawn storm here, and eventually they can probably castle queen side and try to checkmate me on the king side. So at this point I was looking for another option to see if I could seize the initiative on my own and not give white this kingside attack that they're playing for. And that's when I noticed this move, Rook C8. And the point of this move is that, of course it's very natural to put the rook on an open file where it pressures c3 and c2, but obviously this move allows h5, which makes it look like white is just winning the piece. And indeed they are, and black is forced to sacrifice this piece. So the idea of Rook C8 was to meet h5 with bishop takes c2. And the main point behind this sacrifice is that if queen takes c2, I get to take this important d5 pawn. And the position is opening up, white's king is in the center, and I think black is getting really good compensation, especially since I have a lot of pressure on the c3 knight as well. And I already have two pawns for the sacrificed piece, which is usually enough to get some counterplay. And here I think black is maybe even close to winning, because after bishop d2, defending the knight, I have this move e4. And the e-file is opening up, my rooks are excellently placed against all of white's pieces, and this g4 pawn is likely falling soon, so this is pretty bad for white. Like if f takes e4, I can even take with a knight here, and white's position is simply collapsing. Queen takes e4, bishop h4 check, wins the queen. Once I saw that queen takes c2 leads to a position that's very good for black, I thought, well, this is just a winning move because I'm taking this important c2 pawn and I'm threatening all kinds of things now. But then I realized that, the bishop is actually still trapped on c2, and white has this move, Rook C1. And once I saw this, my intuition told me to just stop wasting time calculating this line because it's probably just losing for black. And the reason I thought that was because this rook goes to c1 where it's safer rather than hanging on a1, and white is going to take this bishop on c2 with the rook, defending the knight. The d5 pawn is protected well, and black only has one pawn for the piece and not much of an attack. So at this point I thought that, well, I should go back to the original position and decide, either h6 or h5 and not waste any more time on this dumb move, Rook C8. But then I noticed, and I think I was just lucky to notice, that I have this resource e4. And what's going on here is that I'm threatening to take this pawn on f3, and that will hit the knight, and the g4 pawn will be hanging, and then this bishop will be free to jump out and give some discovery check to the king by the rook. So if f takes e4, then I can simply take this pawn, and well, black is completely winning here. They're up a pawn, and this d5 pawn is hanging, and white's king is still in the center and extremely vulnerable. So the critical line here is rook takes c2. If white does something like f4, then I can simply play bishop d3, and I have an extra pawn, I haven't sacrificed anything, and again, white's king is in the center. So rook takes c2 is a critical line because black is sacrificing a piece. And here I realized that after e takes f3, and something like knight g3, knight takes g4, white is basically busted here because black has so many tactics coming up with his excellently placed rook on e8 and rook on c8. And a lot of white's pieces are just in serious danger here. So if the bishop moves, of course I have some kind of discover check here, and king d1, takes, knight e3 check, for example. Black is winning back their material, and their attack is still going at full steam. And there are lots of different lines here. I don't really have time to go through all of them, but if you want, you're obviously welcome and encouraged to pause the video and think through some of these tactics yourself. But I basically just want to talk about how once you see a couple of different tactics that are in your favor, a lot of times you should go for the sacrifice that you're thinking about, because if there's no obvious defensive refutation, then you get a very unclear position and you have very good chances to win the game, because your opponent has to defend against all these threats and they're very likely to make a mistake. So after finding this move, e4 against Rook C1, I realized that the sacrifice is probably worth going for. But of course, I still wanted to calculate a lot of lines. And of course, I was calculating everything from this initial position here. Right? I can't play this move Rook C8 because it's very committal. After h5, black is definitely giving up a piece, and I have to make sure that the tactics are working in all the lines. So Rook C8, h5, I took on c2, and g5 was the move that my opponent played. And this was also another very natural move to look at, because white is counterattacking the knight, and I can't take on d5 yet. So here I found the move e4. And this was, of course, a move I had to find in my initial calculations. What we're going to see here is that after white takes on f6, I simply recapture with the bishop. So, I gave up a piece, but now all of my pieces are again putting extreme pressure on white's position. And I think black's attack is very strong. So like if f takes e4, I can simply take this guy here. And knight takes e4, I have a choice between taking the knight or taking the rook. And I think in both positions, black might have a slight material disadvantage, but because of white's king being in the center and all of their pieces sort of being loose, I think black has a really good position. So instead of taking on f6, my opponent decided to play f4, which logically is a very good move because he's keeping the e-file closed. And he still has a threat of taking my bishop on c2 and the knight on f6. So in the next part, we're going to see what I had planned against this move f4 and how I was prepared to justify my piece sacrifice. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you around on Chess.com.